Welcome to the Built to Last podcast, a community for coaches founded on the principles encourage, equip, and empower. We are performance coaches working for eternal purpose. Now, here are your co-hosts, Charlie Ray and Justin Bentavania.
All right, we're recording. Episode 1.
Episode 1, Built to Last.
All right, guys, welcome to the Built to Last podcast. My name is Justin Bentavania. I'm a strength and conditioning coach at Hofstra University, and with me is Charlie Ray, who is the director of Olympic Athletic Performance at Houston Baptist University. The two of us are going to be hosting this thing and hopefully passing on some information from coaches who are just dying to pour back into the profession and into the coaches who are on the front lines every day. And so Charlie is the mastermind behind the operations, and so I want to turn it over to him to just kind of explain how we got this thing rolling.
Thanks, Justin. Pretty much, we came up with this idea to create and develop a resource for strength conditioning coaches with a faith component. And there's not really anything out there like this, and so we wanted to, I pretty much wanted to create something where we do a podcast, some sort of interactive interview, and we have a resource where we can connect and collaborate with like-minded coaches, specifically Christian strength coaches that, are here to bring glory to God and to share their faith with their athletes and their coworkers. How do we do that? There's always questions that I always had. How do you share your faith to your athletes and not force it on them? How do you do it in a loving way? So we decided to do this thing, and I met Justin at the CSCA conference this past May. It was pretty awesome. God divinely worked through the FCA breakfast Bible study that morning. I think it was that Thursday or Friday morning, and I kind of casted a vision, said, hey, I'd love to collaborate and connect with anybody, and Justin hopped right on board. And yeah, God has been faithfully working with us through the whole summer, really. So yeah, we created a podcast. That's what you're listening to right now, obviously. And then we also created a website, www.teambuilttolast.com. And that's a website that we want it to be interactive. We want to be able to, have stuff on there to encourage, equip, and empower you guys as our listeners and also as coaches that are wanting to grow in their faith. So you kind of may ask, why did we come up with this Built to Last name? What does that mean? Well, Justin came up with it. And it's the idea of –
You're the official brains, but I'll take credit for that one piece.
It's the idea that we are building lasting athletes, not only for these next 4 years. We want them to be strong. Yes, we want them to be explosive for sure. We want them to be athletic and coordinated. But we also want to develop character. We want to develop good lifelong habits in these athletes. And not only in these athletes, but all the people that we interact with, our coworkers, interns that are underneath us, graduate assistants, even sport coaches, really anybody we're interacting with. And so the Built to Last podcast is really targeted towards building lasting people of impact. That's where it comes from. So yeah, really excited to start this thing off. We also wanted to do a Bible verse each podcast. And so our Bible verse of the month for this month is Colossians 3:23 and 24. It says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord, not for man, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. What a great encouragement that verse is, that to work hard for God's glory. As Christians, we should be the hardest working people in the entire world. And I can't think of a perfect guy to do this first episode than Ron McKeefery. I mean, he has displayed work ethic and integrity like no other.
No, I agree completely. And thinking back of all the things that he's done for our profession, obviously speaking a ton. First time I saw him was speaking at an MSCC national conference. And then from there, really, I think all of us really caught the bug with podcasts from his podcast, Iron Game Chalk Talk.
Yeah.
And even still to this day, he's still pumping out episodes. I think he's like 300 and something now. And
yeah, for sure.
Not saying anything too early, but Coach McKeefery, just be careful. I already see Built to Last podcast 500, but no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, and so Coach McKeefery has just done so much for our profession. Recently, he came up with a few books, I think. Obviously, I read CEO Strength Coach, but I think he has another one that just came out as well.
Yeah.
And so just doing a ton for our profession, and not shocked by any means that as our first guest, he set the bar incredibly high. And just a quick overview on Coach McKeefery. So he was 2-time collegiate strength and conditioning coach of the year. He holds the highest credential certification in the profession as a master strength and conditioning coach through the CSCCA. He's worked professionally for a ton of different organizations, Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Royals, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, NFL Europe's Berlin Thunder. Collegiate-wise, he's worked at Eastern Michigan University, University of Tennessee, and the University of South Florida. Currently, he is the Vice President of Performance and Education at PLAE, and he is still pumping out episodes for the Chalk Talk podcast. And so, without further ado, we just want to welcome Coach McKeefery to the show.
Guys, I'm honored. I think it's phenomenal what you guys are building, and just a platform to be able to share both, my two passions, right? Performance and my faith. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, Coach, and I want to say your podcast has impacted me majorly. I mean, I've been listening to it the past 5-6 years. I've been getting into this field, and I've always been inspired to want to do something similar, getting to tie in a faith aspect with, talking about coaching, but also how can we make better men and women, develop character, that type of stuff. So really appreciate you coming on with us, and I think this is the perfect person to have on our first episode.
Appreciate that.
Well, yeah, Coach, we'll just kind of go ahead and get into it. Really just give us a background into strength and conditioning with how you got into the field, and then also with kind of your transition through college strength conditioning, and then also going into PLAE. That's a very unique role that you've kind of transitioned into. Kind of just give us an overview.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore everybody that's listening, as I've shared this quite a bit, but I've been in the field for 25 years. I started off single parent, 5 kids, really found structure and essentially parenting through my coaches. So coaches had an impact on me that led me to finding the weight room. The weight room led me to college scholarship. College scholarship led me to kind of finding strength and conditioning as a profession. And, I've started early in professional baseball, then the NFL. Most of my career is bounced between the NFL and, major college football. Had, stints with the Army Special Forces, and now I work with teams kind of all around the world. Was really inspired by, we adopted our 4 kids, all international, 3 from the Ukraine and 1 from Honduras. And NFL Europe to try to make a global impact, and the impact, felt like God called me to kind of impact more than just the 105 guys that I was working with each year on the football team, and so, that was really beside that, and the fact that I was living apart from my family, which is, it sounds worse than it was, but it's it's one of those negative things of our profession. I made the leap to work for PLAE, and it's been great to kind of build out a performance and education initiative and kind of create a little bit different lane than what strength coaches have typically done as kind of a twilight in their career, I suppose.
Very cool. No, it's awesome, Coach. And do you mind just elaborating now more a little bit on the faith journey as well? Because obviously it's something that I think, thinking about our listeners, is probably something really important to everybody to hear kind of the other side of the coin. And if you wouldn't mind touch on that as well, that would be awesome. Just your journey coming to know the Lord and how you've grown there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I grew up, I tell this story. I'm glad you brought that up. Because people are probably familiar with, me, where I grew up in inner city Kansas City, and living across the street from this park that a lot of gang fights would be in, and drug deals and whatnot. And what's funny is a block the other way, there was a little Bible church that was there. And, my brother and I, we would get up early Sunday morning, and early Saturday morning we got up and we went over to the park to see what kind of knives and Chinese stars and different things that we could find from the fights. But every Sunday morning we went down to and watched, all the kids running around at the church. And honestly, we were kind of, we had ratty clothes, and we didn't have parents that took us or anything like that. So we'd kind of hide across the street. And some days we made fun of the kids, and some days we just hid, and but every day we were both kind of like, man, we wish we could be there, and just saw the joy and the smiles and whatnot. And so we moved north of the river, when my parents separated, and we kind of went into an apartment complex, and we got befriended by a family that went to Awanas at a Baptist church. And so we went with them one time, and it was a combination of doing the Awana Olympics with Bible study and whatnot. And so it was kind of blending, two passions, right? Athletic movement and then this journey with the Lord. And so accepted the Lord when I was 12 years old, and never really looked back since, and made FCA and Athletes in Action a part of my life through high school and college, and have continued to be a part of it throughout.
That's awesome, Coach. And then if you don't mind, just a follow-up question on that. So obviously in any journey we take, there are going to be ebbs and flows and highs and lows, and accepting the Lord so young in your life at age 12, was it something that was more of a steady progression for you, where over time you grew in that faith, or was there times when there was super high highs and maybe some lower lows? Do you mind touching on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think anybody that's a Christian or anybody that's listening to this, I'm not the moral compass, right? I'm a sinner just like everybody else, and I try to live my life right. I try to live, with putting God first, but I fail every single day in some way. But that said, I think I've always, the Lord's always put some amazing people in my life, whether it's a family that kind of took me in then, or surrounded me with a mentor when I was in high school, or surrounded me with a Christian coach, or the FCA board in college. I've always maintained a centering individual in my life, somebody to kind of always bring me back to making sure that I was making good decisions, and that I was being held accountable to the decisions that I was making, and so I don't feel like I ever got too far off the rails, in terms of, maybe, some of the challenges that present themselves through high school and college. I was always made, going to an FCA camp or a revival of some sort, a part of my annual plan, I guess. So that was always kind of a good recentering point every year. But yeah, I think everybody faces challenges. I mean, I lost my brother. My brother was murdered. That same brother that I was telling you about, going and watching the church, he was hit by somebody reaching for their cell phone that was under the influence, and while he was changing his tire. And so you could imagine, I mean, that's, you have a brother that is the closest person that I had been to, that moved down to Tampa to live with me and my wife, and to move down there to be around us. And, that was definitely a time period where I was like, this plan doesn't quite make sense to me, God, and, you got to dig in, and you got to, at the end of the day, you just have to have faith that there's a reason, and honestly, that was what gave me comfort in that time, was that I just felt like God needed him more than I did, and to me, that was, for whatever reason, that was enough to kind of get me past it.
Man, that's incredible, Coach. Thanks for sharing that. I know it can't be easy to share some of those hard trials that we go through as in our Christian walks, but one of the things I wanted to kind of transition into is core values as a person, and also leading your family with those similar core values into almost family core values. Talk a little bit about your family and your personal core values, and how you've kind of led your family and shepherding them and leading them in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think family is, something that was really, really important to me growing up the way that I did, because I really didn't have a family dynamic that I was proud of. I mean, I'm now I can look back and think, my mom worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to provide for us, but when I was growing up, it was just that she was gone a lot, and So I can appreciate that now. So to me, I always kind of lived by that my family wasn't going to have the same challenges and tribulations that I faced. And so, staying faithful to my wife, staying committed to my, to my family, my kids, and being, a good dad, were things that I was both drawn to biblically, but also just in, emotionally, that was stuff that I just made an early commitment that was going to be important to me. In terms of leading the family, I think for us, I think faith, if you look historically through faith, there's been crusades, there's been bloodshed, there's been, all these different things over different kind of topics that are even presenting themselves today in our politics and our country and world. And we don't always understand, different things. And so for us, it's just love one another, serve one another, and try to live with integrity and every single day. And obviously I can find biblically how that's important. But I can also, just talk about just kind of, I think one of the things that, there's a verse in the Bible, I can't remember the verse off the top of my head, but there's a verse that says that you don't throw a light into the light, you throw a light into the darkness. And to me, that's what coaching is. That's what living in a sinful world is. It's not about surrounding yourself just with the holier than thou, everybody that believes the exact same way. It's literally putting yourself, I remember taking a mission to 5 Points in inner city Denver and living out of the bottom of a church for a month, and walking the streets at night and talking to the homeless, and having to be literally taught by the guardian angels how to handle yourself if you're put in a compromised situation. And those times were, those were the most rewarding times, when you had conversations with people that you didn't believe the exact same way you did, or didn't have the same kind of creature comforts that you did. That's when I felt like I grew the most. And so that's, coaching has been a witness for me. And to me, that's how I've been able to maintain, my Christian values, but my Christian values are just values that I think any good person should live by, and trying to either come out of that from a biblical standpoint, or just just trying to get, athletes or people that I surround myself to live a little bit better. That's really what motivates me.
Yeah, that's awesome too, because as Christians, we're called, to be a light among the darkness. We're called, there's a verse about, those who need a doctor, those that are sick, and so that's so cool to hear from your side, that you view coaching as like a ministry to kind of combine that and to go out and to be a light to those athletes. And same with your family, you kind of view it almost, sounds like different coins, but it's kind of the same mission.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, it's tough in coaching because, it's a 24/7, 365 day a year job,
Yeah.
Literally in the NFL, we played on Sundays. I worked on Sundays. And so I couldn't have the traditional, go to Sunday school, go to chapel, go to Wednesday service. I didn't have that, for most of my adult life, and so I feel like, in some ways I missed out on that, but I was more than rewarded with chaplains, team chaplains that were phenomenal, and godly men and women that were phenomenal, and a mission. To me, that's the most important thing, which is being in the trenches, just like we are in the weight room, but being in the trenches and providing a light for people that are in the darkness, and when, we all know as strength coaches, you get approached by athletes with some of the deepest, darkest secrets, deepest, darkest insecurities. And you might be the one and only person that hears that, and so what a tremendous opportunity and what a tremendous responsibility we all have as coaches to shine a light,
Yeah.
That's
I
a
can't
great
tell you how many times an athlete has come up to me and said something along the lines of, well, you don't really affect my playing time, or we don't really affect their scholarships, or we don't really recruit them, but yet we can have such an impact on them. So many opportunities left and right.
Yeah, we don't, there's not a hidden agenda, right?
Yeah.
It's not a transactional relationship with most strength coaches, because you don't control money or playing time or those types of things, but you do have a transformative type of relationship if you invest. There's plenty of strength coaches that don't invest, and they're missing out on probably the most rewarding part. And when you talk about the compensation that you get for the time that you give. I mean, I think I did it one time. I think I made like 20 cents an hour. At one point during my career,
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're in it for the fiscal or the monetary benefits, you're fighting a losing battle, and so there has to be something more. And hopefully, I see that on the other side of this life,
No, that's awesome, Coach. And I know a lot of times in that little segment we mentioned being light and darkness, and how many times it comes up throughout the day on my mind as well. And I even remember just personally when I was in high school, looking to play lacrosse in college, looking at a bunch of different schools. One of them was a Christian school, a school that held strong Christian values, and even the admissions office when we met with the admissions counselor, he actually prayed with me and my father. And being a Christian going into college and my father having a strong faith, that was just a really cool experience for us that impacted me a bunch. And just for a second, you think about how cool it could be to be around like-minded believers in college. But I also remember on the ride home when we were driving in the car, talking it over, like you said, I just told my father, I said, I want to be on the battlefield. I want to be in the trenches. And how much of an impact am I making where there are already people who are like-minded like me? And so I decided to go to a different school, and not to say that there isn't an opportunity there at schools that do hold Christian values already. But for me, it was the same thought process where I wanted to be light in the darkness, and I wanted to make that impact there. And working with people every day who don't know the Lord, it's not a discouragement to me. It's an encouragement to make more of an impact. And I appreciate you being so open about your thoughts there as well.
I think, I think it's important for people to realize.
Coach, you there?
Some biblical colleges. Can you guys hear me?
Now we got you. Yep.
Yeah. So some biblical colleges, and those recruiting visits were twice as bad as some of the secular visits that I took, in terms of what was available or surrounded, those environments. So it's not always all it's cracked up to be. But to me, like even to this day, I'd love to say that I don't cuss, but I do. I'd love to say that I don't have the best thought, the best thoughts or whatever. But I think, again, we're all sinners. I think the key is to try to live a life of service the best that you possibly can. And you have one judge. You have to answer for to one person at the end of the thing, and know that day's coming, good or bad. That to me is what kind of drives me, I suppose. But before we go to the next thing, that verse, John 1:4-9, is something that I would throw out there.
Awesome, that's great, Coach. And then transitioning now, obviously talking about making an impact, it's about light in the darkness and things like that in John 1:4-9. How do you now try and make an impact on your family with your faith? Are you doing something specifically to disciple them, to help them grow in their faith? Obviously at work, you're making a huge impact on your athletes. What are you doing at home with your family?
Yeah, I think it's, you provide them with all the same things that, church camp and the whole deal that you surround probably any Christian family with. But ultimately, to me, I think it's finding those moments daily to help them see those Christian values in everyday interactions, and so that could be as simple as, racing to win the prize, in athletics, to making sure that you're serving, the poor and hungry, and so we routinely find ways to try to put them in situations where they're uncomfortable ethically, morally, and then challenge them to grow in those situations.
That's awesome, Coach. Well, really appreciate you sharing that. We wanted to ask you also about mentors. So it's kind of cool. Earlier you mentioned in your story, your faith journey, that mentors through FCA and Athletes in Action and just different coaches had a huge impact on your life. And obviously we as coaches are mentors to so many athletes, and then also to our families, discipling them and that kind of stuff. What do you think makes a great mentor? When I think of Ron McKeefery, I think of, man, this guy, he has mentored so many people. I mean, the Iron Game Chalk Talk, everything he's doing with PLAE, so many different things. So what do you think makes a great mentor?
Yeah, to me, that's easy. I think it's two things. It's investment and accountability. All the mentors that I've had in my life, that's what they've poured into it. And so they've built trust, and trust allows you to receive information, but they were also not afraid to hold me extremely accountable for, from a coaching perspective, coaching skills, or from a biblical perspective, biblical principles. And so, leaders that I've had in my life, or, Chris Creighton is the guy that I worked for at Eastern Michigan, but he's the guy that I played for at Ottawa University. Is one of the most, godly competitors that I've ever met, and he showed me that you could have both. You could be extremely competitive, but be a man of faith and integrity. But I'll tell you one thing. I mean, that dude will hold you extremely accountable, too. And Coach Dungy with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is another one that was just a quiet, confident person that spoke with wisdom with almost every word, and showed me a different side of coaching. And so between those two was a balance. And David Lane was our team chaplain at South Florida, who I just saw this humble servant every single day, breaking down barriers with athletes that you wouldn't think that he would ever have a chance to reach, and would reach them on a daily basis. And so, but the common thread between all three of those people were the fact that they would invest, and then they would hold you accountable.
It's a great book called Lead for God's Sake. I don't know if you guys have ever read that one.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, it reminds me just of that. So I have right behind me on the wall there, it's the stick figure. On one hand, he's got the money bag with the reward, and the other hand, he's got the axe with fear. Yeah. And it sounds like you're talking about that perfect blend. And then right in the middle is love with the heart. And
with the heart.
Yeah, and people have asked me, coaches have asked me to give presentations on leadership for some of our teams here. And I always tell them it's the same thing. Like, there's no secret formula. It's just when you show people that you love them, I think you get a little bit better response. And so if I would agree with that 100-fold, Coach McKeefery. And if there's, I think, even one thing that I would credit my success to as a coach, it would just be loving my athletes, and they'll run through a wall for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
But that love came through, again, investment. Nobody that you've never loved somebody that didn't pour into your life. And I think that's work. And I think that's a lot of times that's what people fail to realize is it's not just them showing up for the hour that they're going to train with you. And, that's transactional. They show up, they put in the work, they leave. That's the end of the relationship. That's transactional. It's the text, it's the phone calls, it's the sitting with them at lunch, it's the meetings outside of the workouts. That's where you invest, and that's where you have the opportunity to build trust, and trust leads to love.
Wow. 100% agree. No, 100% agree. Coach, transitioning now a little bit to your daily disciplines. So things in your routine. Do you have anything that you feel like keeps you grounded or centered that you do? Maybe it's every morning or every day. That's just a kind of a part of your daily ritual.
Yeah, I mean, every single day, I use Coach Dungy's daily devotional. That's, I've gone through that, almost every day for a number of years. I just keep repeating it just because I haven't found a daily devotional that I like better.
No, that's a great one.
I really try to, I think for me, it's reaching out, and because, faith is important to me, or because of the way that I live my life, I think I'm surrounded by people of similar beliefs. And so almost every single day that I'm reaching out to somebody, phone call, Skype, Zoom, whatever, which usually leads to both professional development, but also personal growth. And I think that's important as well, because again, I mean, even this conversation right here is, and again, vulnerability. I'm convicted by the fact that I think I need to be doing more with my family. I mean, I think I do a pretty good job, but like having to say that out loud and answer that question, I need to do more.
I think we all can. Same here.
I think, yeah, no doubt about it. But I think having those kind of conversations, I think, is important, because you do, again, I mean, it's not like Jesus is coming out of the clouds and saying, do this. He's using people and actions and different events to talk to you,
Yeah, great point.
Coach, another thing that we wanted to talk about was this concept of ego. And, there's been books out there, Ego is the Enemy, and in our field, it's so easy to kind of let other people talk you up, and you have, championships, you've been a lot of places, you've been in the field a while. It's easy to kind of let your ego kind of take over. How do you stay grounded with humility and with just continuing to protect yourself against pride? And we see pride in the Bible. I mean, that really, if you look at it, that's probably one of the roots of all sin is pride, wanting to do things your way or making it all about you. What do you do to stay humble?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if there's anything that I do specifically to try to do that, other than I think age and wisdom kind of help you, learn in that process. I mentioned this earlier today, even on a podcast, but, I had a coach that told me that, as he grew in the profession, he just learned how to start asking, he started to learn how to ask the right questions, let alone have any of the answers. And that's how I feel about faith. That's how I feel about coaching. That's how, as I've gotten more knowledge, I think having a family, and a support system also, challenges you in that way. But yeah, to me, honestly, I think that God has a way of knocking you down if you get too high, Wow. And, there's a way of kind of recentering you. And there's been plenty of times in my career where I thought I, invented the first freaking bench press or something. And wow. No, dummy, that's been around for a lot of time, and again, little actions and little ways, are those shots to kind of say, oh man, that's, I need to calm down a little bit. But I would also say this. I think so many times, as Christians, I think, especially when you work with, hard inner city kids that maybe never been around the word or the belief system, such as, or whatever, like Christians aren't weak. They're not timid. They're not, they don't need to come across that way. They don't need to be, they also, branding yourself as a man of faith or a woman of faith is not a bad thing either, and putting yourself out there like that. So, I think there is some, I don't think you ever do it, if you are faith-based and that you're serving and it comes from a heart of servitude, then I think, there's nothing wrong with having a podcast or writing a book or, speaking at a conference or those types of things. I think we should be challenging ourselves to grow in that way too. So we're not timid or weak. We need to be pushing ourselves, but we also need to make sure that we have a support system to make sure that we're staying grounded or not, and not making sure that you're serving yourself, but you're serving the right people.
So a support system is a way that you have kind of helped other people objectively kind of look into your life and be able to call you out as, hey, drinking a little too much pride sauce. We need to humble you down a little bit. Having maybe your family, some close mentors, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's my wife. I mean, my wife is she's the balance to me, and she never lets me get too high at all, ever. So she'll be like, we'll get off this thing, and she'll be like, well, why are they talking to you?
And Coach, even just another thing you talked about there in terms of Christians don't have to be timid. I remember I was watching an interview with Coach Jerry Palmieri at one point. I think Athletes in Action published something, and he referenced one of his favorite Bible verses. I think it was from Ecclesiastes, where it said, whatever you do, do with all your might. And he's like, I coach football players, and that means hitting pretty hard, And so, and I remember one time I was in a diner with my grandmother. We were eating lunch, and I was playing lacrosse in college at the time, and she watched the game, and she just asked me, she's like, how do you kind of justify your faith with that game? And to her, it was just like a foreign thing of how violent it was. And he's supposed to be love your neighbor as yourself or pray for your enemy. And so it is such a misconception, I think, among people of what it means to be a Christian or a follower of Jesus. And so I just, it's just something that comes to mind. And even people like Tim Tebow or athletes who just have been really outspoken about their faith, who do things really, really well on the field or in their professions. I mean, that was one reason why we wanted to start this podcast when me and Charlie were talking it over. And he was even saying how gravitated he was to men of character and men of faith who were really good coaches. It's like you want to learn from great people and great coaches. And I believe that God deserves the best in whatever field it is because he created it, And if that means getting after your athletes sometimes to hold them accountable, well, the Lord gets after me sometimes to hold me accountable in different ways. Right. And so, I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, I think about that verse in Hebrews, the Lord disciplines those he loves. And so kind of in the same way, we as coaches, it really is loving. It's the most loving thing to do, to hold them accountable, to say what you mean and to mean what you say. Although it's hard, it's the most loving thing you can do to really care about them. The coach who ignores you and doesn't talk to you and doesn't hold you accountable, you have to question, do they really care about you? And like what Coach McKeefery, what you're saying, investing, that's an investment.
Right. Well, I think to add to that too, I think, when you do have this secret, which I think we all believe we have this secret, right? You should be screaming that from the mountaintops. You find an impossible way to kind of to spread that message, and if you knew the secret to cure cancer and you just held that to yourself, then how, that's not biblical either, and so to me, I think sometimes I think the passivity of Christianity sometimes really upsets me,
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I mean, you played lacrosse, I played football, it's like, I don't have a problem mixing it up with somebody.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And then, Coach, on top of all that, and obviously you mentioned a little bit earlier on how you thought you invented the first bench press and things like that.
I didn't do that.
But and so with all this advice that we are giving to coaches, and there's just a ton in here that I'm even taking away as well. If you think that if there was one piece of coaching advice, strength and conditioning wise, and then one piece of spiritual advice that you can give to young strength coaches coming up in the profession, like I spoke about how Charlie and I gravitated toward people like yourself who are proficient in what they did and had a strong faith and character. What are some of the things, again, just to build on what we're talking about, that you would give them maybe professionally and spiritually, just maybe something you wish you would have known when you were younger?
Yeah, the coaching piece is easy because I give that a lot. I think, I always tell people not to confuse passion with emotion. A lot of times we have an emotional response to trying to convey our passion. Somebody shows up late, you cuss them out. You're really just trying to show your passion for doing the right things and showing up on time and, respecting their teammates and respecting you. But you had an emotional response, and that has the opportunity to break down relationships. Spiritually, I really think that it's, the number one piece of advice I would say is to have a support system that you can rely on, but something a little bit, more tactically driven in terms of coaching would be, I think our athletes, I think because there are so many transactional coaches that exist, I think they're very skeptical about any and all advice, any and all interactions. And so what I would learn from David Lane, our team chaplain in South Florida, was it was very rarely God this, God that, Bible verse here, and I'm hitting you over with the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really biblical teachings, but in a way that the athletes could understand, and relate to. And what that naturally did is it drew them closer and closer together to where before you knew it, they were giving their life to Christ. And so to me, I think that I think that tactical advice of, I think it's easy when you come off of like my son and I, we went to with Athletes in Action, and I was a strength coach for Team USA football, and so he got to go with me for a month, and we're around the team, and everybody left there super, super on fire. And I think, the people that went back that just started freaking preaching anything and everything and hitting everybody over the head with the Bible probably fizzled out. But the ones that really were impacted, that took those lessons and applied them in a way that was organic to the situations that called for them, probably had the most success.
Wow. It reminds me of that quote, I can't hear what you're saying because your actions are screaming at me.
Right.
And people will actually hear more what you do instead of hearing what you actually say. And so, and you see that in scripture too. It's living out your core values in such a way. I've been reading this book by John Wooden, and he talks, all these people that they're interviewing in this book talk about he lived out the values that he believed in so well that they had no other choice, but they wanted to follow him because he lived it out. And it's one thing to talk about it, but I think what you're saying, Coach McKeefery, is really living out your core values as a Christian, as a man or a woman of God, in such a way where your athletes are seeing that light be exposed through action, because that's what love is. It's action. That's what Jesus did on the cross. He showed us the perfect example, serving.
And you'll be amazed about how many questions that brings up, and the questions are the opportunities.
Wow. Awesome. Well, Coach, really appreciate you coming on the show. We wanted to finish with just a few quick questions at the end. If you could give us one of your favorite books, maybe something that's related to personal growth or a spiritual Christian book that's really helped you grow in your faith.
There's two faith-based books that I think are really good. Kings and Coaches, I think, is a great one. I can't remember the author of that, but it's all about, Old Testament kings and relating them to coaching principles. And then Raising a Modern Day Knight is another great one for the fathers and mothers that are listening. That's all about, trying to set, not letting society dictate when your kids meet milestones, but rather that you, back in medieval times, you were a squire, and until somebody said you were a page, and then you were a page until your family and community said that you were, a knight, and it was there was ceremonies, and there was, so you're not an adult when you smoke cigarettes for the first time, or when you have sex for the first time, or when you can vote, or when you turn 18. It's when your family says you're an adult, so I think those are two really good books.
I'll have to check it out.
I would have said for Lead for God's sake, but you guys stole that one from me already.
Awesome. And then what about a favorite Bible verse or a story in the Bible that you're really drawn to, or even a character in the Bible that you really relate to?
Yeah. You know what? Another book that I just read that I would throw out there, because it answers this question, is In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day.
Oh, great book. Great book. I've read that. Yeah. Mark Batterson, right?
Yeah. Fantastic. And you would probably be able to answer this, but what's the Benaiah? Is it what's
Benaniah?
Benaniah. Again, there's vulnerability in me not knowing the name, but that story impacted me in a way that's probably one of my favorite stories of the Bible. You go to all the normal ones, David and Goliath and all the normal, but that one really stood out to me in a way that honestly, it kind of I found it very relatable because that's how I've had to approach my whole life, is having to chase these lions.
Chase that lion, yeah.
And often find myself face to face with them in tight quarters saying, hey, let's go, And,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's pretty much the Bible verse that I probably learned it on the first day at Awana, and it's been kind of the guiding, principle. Iron sharpens iron. As one man does another, as another one that I try to live by as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's a bunch of them, and those are probably popular ones, but I'm first, so I get to steal them.
Awesome. And then last little question: how do you define success?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's being able to stand in front of the gates and say that I was a good and faithful servant.
Amen. Right there.
Be able to do that in a way that, that you're proud. You're proud when you stand in that position as a father, as a husband, as a coach, as a member of society. I try to be a good and faithful servant in all those ways.
No, that's fantastic, Coach. And we can't thank you enough for sharing so much information. Like you said, being so vulnerable. And I can speak for both Charlie and I when I say that we both truly look up to you in the profession and admire you as a coach and as a man of God. And it's just something that, I just would truly hope that through this podcast that a lot of coaches would learn from your life. And like you said, mistakes and successes. And we just thank you for just sharing all of it and being transparent. And so if there's any way the listeners want to get in touch with you and learn some more, do you have a way for them to do that?
Yeah, no, first guys, thanks so much for letting me come on and be a part of this. It's Charlie and I talked about it at one of the CSCCAs, and I think it's something that it's been missing, and I think it's needed to combine two passions that a lot of people share.
Yeah.
And to talk about it regularly, I think that's fantastic. And then the fact that you guys have committed your time and energy to do this, I know how much work goes into putting these things on, and how much work you guys have done to research this and do it the right way. So I'm appreciative of that. For me, I'm pretty active on social media. It's at McKeefery on pretty much every platform, and a website, ronmckeefery.com, and then PLAEperform.com, PLAE perform.com is the company I work for. So
awesome. Thanks so much, Coach. We appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate everything you're doing, the way you're living your life and making an impact. And we hope to talk again soon.
Yeah, Coach. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Built to Last podcast, where we encourage, equip, and empower coaches to live out their core values where they live, work, and wherever they build relationships. Have a blessed day, striving to build lasting impact.